Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call the town meeting to order. First order of business, if everyone could please rise so we can do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it serves, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jennifer Scalise-Mullet, and I have the pleasure of being your town moderator today. So before we start town meeting, I'm going to start with a few ground rules for us all. So when we have discussions on the motion, people are going to be limited to 3 minutes apiece for that discussion, for their perspective. All discussion points need to be relevant to the motion or amendment that's going to be presented. And whatever discussion is adding should be new to the discussion. So there should be additional ideas, additional points, etc. We'd like to keep this meeting going in a prudent manner, and we want to be sure people are, hello? Okay. We want to be sure that people are heard and they have the opportunity to be heard. So with that said, the first thing I'd like to do is make sure that everyone's clickers are working. So you should see a question come up. So test your clickers. Is today Monday? And the voting starts now. You should see an okay when you press the button. Okay, the vote is closed. And it's 189 to 7. So 7 people do not think today is Monday. So with that said, if anyone feels like they're having trouble with their clicker, we have folks at the registration. We have plenty of batteries, etc. But it looks like we got about the amount of folks that are in the room. So I think we're in a good place. So let's get started. Article 1, I'll entertain a motion that the town raise and appropriate $12,812,121 and to transfer the additional sum of $9,236 from the additional sources identified in the warrant under Article 1 for a total appropriation of $13,733,157 to be expended as shown in the municipal operating and omnibus budget as printed at the back of the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion on the motion. You have to be by the microphones to speak. Okay, there being none.
There's one coming down the stairs.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Dawn Hartnett, that's so loud. Dawn Hartnett, 14 Quail Roost Drive. So I just have a question. So when we talk about, like, this will come up later when we're talking about needing to possibly pass a Proposition 2.5, why are we supporting double-digit raises? That's my question.
I'll defer to the Finance Committee for an answer on that. Finance Committee?
This is George Handy, Chairman of the Finance Committee of Sterling. The easy for me to say, the double-digit wage increases are pretty much mandated either by contracts with our unionized employees and a STEP program which we implemented years ago and update regularly. Plus a cost of living increase, which this year was recommended by the Select Board of 3%. So essentially what happens, the cost of living increase of 3% is actually added to the step increase graph, which you will see on page 19, Article 22. I'll give everybody an opportunity to get there so you can understand how the wage increases work. The steps are across the top of the graph. That's step 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And the grade levels are down the left side, which is grade 1, 2, 3, 4. The steps are representative of years of service. So, is somebody asking me a question?
No,
Oh, okay.
you can continue.
So, as an example, somebody hired into step 1 in year 1 would be allocated an hourly wage of $15.79. In year 2, if the employee completes the first year, he actually moves up a step and his wage would go to $16.42. Now, that is a 4% increase. Every step is 4% from the prior year. However, when the select board recommends a 3% increase, it actually increases every step by 3%. So going from step 1 to step 2 with a 3% COLA increase is actually representing a 7% increase. Same with step 2 to 3, etc. So if my memory serves me correct, the first 3 years of employment, you get a step increase every year. So depending on what the COLA increase is that's approved by the select board, that could be 7% per year. In years, I believe it's 4 through 6, it's every other year, and 7 on, it's every 3 years, I believe. Now the grades are what level of proficiency an individual has in their position. And these were pretty much dictated by the last wage and salary survey we had by a professional organization. I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago. And people's positions were studied and they were allocated a grade for that position. So when somebody moves up a grade, that also represents a 4% increase on the compensation chart. So a grade up is 4% and a step is 4%. A COLA adjusts the entire chart by whatever the COLA percentage is. So I hope that has helped to answer your question. This is for non-union and non-contractual employees. Unions and contractual employees have their own wage scales, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any additional discussion on this motion, so I'd like to put it on the floor for a vote. You're voting whether or not you approve the town operating budget, and the voting starts now. This one requires 2/3 in order to pass. Okay, the vote is closed. and it passes by a 2/3 majority vote. Next. Hold on 1 minute, Jim. I didn't recognize you. First, what I would like to do is entertain a motion to move Article 29 as an amendment to Article 2. Do I have someone moving for that?
I have a motion to take Article 29 out of order and to amend it with language that I will give you.
Jim, I'm asking, I put a comment on there, and I'm asking if I have a motion for making Article 29 as an amendment to Article 2. Is there a motion on the floor? Do I have a second? Thank you. We can have discussion on that, please. Actually, I'm sorry, before we have discussion on that, I want to recognize Dr. Riley, and I want to recognize the Finance Committee for a presentation.
I'd like to be heard on the motion.
I'm sorry, we're discussing this motion with presentations first. Mr. Gettings, you're out of order. I'd like to have a discussion on the motion on the floor, please.
That's what I want to do.
Yes, but we're having a presentation first by Dr. Riley and the Finance Committee, which is what I just said.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Madam Moderator, is it okay to begin?
Yes, please, Dr. Riley.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Riley. I'm superintendent of the Wachusett Regional School System. We had some information out. Unfortunately, I had only put it on one side of the auditorium. So if you came in through these doors, you'll have that information. If you came through these doors, we got it out a little bit late, and I apologize, but I wanted to go through some of the information that I had on that sheet, and then also give you a very brief presentation just about our budget and the actual financials. And I think there's been some information that went out that I find personally a little bit unfortunate, because I think it doesn't represent what we're actually asking for tonight. We are actually asking for an increase that's less in terms of an increase than last year, both in total money and then, in the total increase, but then also the percentage of increase. But I want to talk about a few things that we're trying to accomplish in this budget first off. First, what I would want people to understand is this year, there really was a historic drop in the increase in our state funding. And so last year, our Chapter 78, which is the main part of funding we get from the state, the increase was $3.5 million, just about, or a 10.5% increase from the previous year. This year, our increase from the state was 0.6%, so $202,000. And so obviously there's a huge difference in terms of the increase in our state funding, and that's had an impact on how much we're asking the towns for their discretionary amount. What I would want to remind you again is the overall increase in your assessment is actually less than it was last year, and the percentage is less. But that's because we've tried to do a lot of hard work to make sure that the budget is as reasonable as possible. And I can honestly tell you that this budget represents the lowest amount we can have in every single appropriation without touching our staff. We are at the point where if any amount of the budget is reduced, we're going to have to reduce our staff. And I'm desperately trying to avoid that. This is just a graph that shows you what our increases have been traditionally in our state funding. FY20 was about $1 million. FY21 was $1.5 million. FY22, that's the COVID year. and that was the year that the state budget didn't get passed until late in the summer. The other things that was helping out schools at that time was there were a lot of federal grants and state grants that were supporting through COVID relief. FY23, we saw an increase of $2.6 million, and then last fiscal year, we saw an increase of $3.4 million. This year, unfortunately, though, that dropped to $200,000. And so there really was a funding cliff in terms of how we were supported from the state. Discretionary spending, you have a pamphlet that was handed out and also an email was sent out from the FinCom. And it suggested that 17.16% in discretionary funding, the ask had been increased. And that's true. But what it doesn't represent is the overall increase that we're asking for in this budget. And then it also doesn't acknowledge that why we're asking for more discretionary funding is actually because our state funding increase was so low. The most significant factor in discretionary assessment is the level of state funding that we receive. And you could actually see that last year. When you look at the information you were handed out, last year's discretionary increase was 3.81%. However, your increase in the amount for your assessment and the percentage of the assessment was actually higher than it is this year. And so there really is no correlation between the two. Sterling's overall assessment, as I mentioned earlier, it's 4.56%. Do I understand that's more than a lot of people want to pay? I do. And I understand that taxes are serious and towns want to avoid overrides. I'm a resident of Holden. We're in a similar situation. I can only tell you that we're really trying to take it seriously. And if citizens have questions about any of our appropriations, I'd be happy to explain how we arrived at those numbers. Here's another way of looking at that information I shared a little bit earlier. And so the required spending by the state last year was much higher than what they supplied to us in Chapter 70. And that's why your discretionary showed in orange is so low. This year, you can see the discretionary part of our budget is much higher because the state or required spending or amount is so much lower. But if you look at the two numbers, we're actually lower this year in overall increase in the percentage of increase. Actual school spending from FY23, one of the things people have proposed is that we should just be able to live off the foundation budget. 98% of the school districts in the state of Massachusetts do not survive on the foundation budget. In fact, those 2% that do survive on it, they are predominantly large urban school districts and then also vocational schools. How can they do it? Their reimbursement rate from the state is far higher than what we get in Wachusett. I think one of the other things I want to point out is more than half of the Massachusetts school districts that do exceed their foundation budget do so by at least 40%. We exceed our foundation budget by 25.2%. That was the most recent analysis they had from DESE in FY23. Will we be a little bit higher this year? Yes, I think we will. Will we approach the state average? No, we won't. We'll be lower than that. Here's another example of where we spend money compared to our peers, our DART peers, other regional schools, and also the state average. You can see in FY23, Wachusett was at 25% above the foundation budget, where all of our peers are spending a lot more than we are. For per pupil spending, that's another analysis that sometimes people use in terms of how the school district and students are supported. Please know I'm not sharing this information to complain. I'm just doing it to normalize some of the conversations that have been happening. In Wachusett, our average per pupil expenditure FY23 was $17,413. The state average was $21,116. We rank 287 out of 308 districts. Now, I would be hopeful when we see the FY24 numbers, we're going to be a little bit higher, because I do certainly respect and appreciate us passing the budget last year, but we still are in the bottom 15, 20%. which again, I'm not complaining about, but when people say our budget's so high and we're wasting money, that's not what the data shows. And so the last thing, and I don't know if you really want to see this, but I would say that a lot of times people wonder about where we are in terms of staffing and why am I trying so hard to protect our staff in our schools? And the reason why is because percentage-wise, we have far fewer staff than a lot of other school districts, okay? And again, this is analysis, this is all available on the DESE website. And this data was taken from October of this year. So per 100 students, Wachusett, the number of administrators we have, we're at 0.6 in green. The Massachusetts average is 1.1 in blue. For the number of teachers we have, we're 7.2 per 100 students. The state average is 8.4. For paraprofessionals, we have 3.5 for every 100 students compared to the state average of 2.6. For student support staff, we have an average of 0.5 for every 100 students. State average is 0.8. For our clerical staff, we have 0.6 per 100 students. The Mass state average is 1. And then finally, for technology staff, we have 0.1 per 100 students, and 0.2 is the average for the state. I shared this information just because these are the groups that DESE identifies on their website. I didn't pick them or anything like that. I just wanted to be transparent and share you all of that information. So just quick in summary, am I okay on time? I'd want to share just a couple of things to please bear in mind when you consider all these articles. Our total budget increase this year is 4.97%. But for Sterling, the increase we're asking for this year is $594,545. It's an increase of 4.56% in your overall assessment. And again, I just ask you to consider this and support. I realize it is a high number, but we really are trying to get to the point where we can keep the teaching staff and all the other staff we have. I think they do a good job. I think we have a lot of work to do in the district, but I can honestly tell you that reducing our staff, it's going to have a huge impact on our ability to deliver services for kids. Please remember that the increase in our state aid was impacted greatly this year. We went from an increase last year of $3.4 million to $200,000 this year. That's why you see the difference in discretionary spending. Now, one thing I would want to mention to everybody, there is a little bit of hope. Right now, the House had passed a new budget where we could get an additional $600,000 in state aid, and the Senate, I believe, will vote on their package, I believe, on Tuesday. I am letting you know that myself and Director Grise, she's our finance director, she's in Paxton tonight. We are both going to advocate to school committee that the majority of that money go back to the towns to reduce your assessments. It is a school committee vote, but that will be our recommendation. Lastly, please remember that yes, our budget is large, and I'd never deny that. And I know when you exceed 50% of a town's budget, it's serious, and you should be able to represent where the money's going and why it's going there. But also know that when you look at the state landscape, our budget is not extremely high compared to most of the other districts in the state. We're below the state average. And that's why if we don't pass this budget, the impact on our school system is going to be great. And so that's it for now, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to our budget.
Thank you. Now for the Finance Committee. And just a reminder, the motion on the floor is to amend Article 2 to that reduced amount from Article 29.
I'd like to introduce Joe King. He is our school liaison for the Finance Committee to address this motion to, I believe, use the numbers in Article 29 as they currently exist to replace the numbers in Article 2 as it currently exists. I'm not sure where that came from, but I'll turn this over to Joe.
Testing. Thank you, Dr. Riley, for that presentation. It's one that I've seen before when we had the first budget review. I'd start out by pointing out that the difference between last year's increase and this year's increase, both of them were very large increases for the town of Sterling. The difference is $15,000. Last year, we paid $15,000 more than the large increase we're seeing this year. I can try. Is that better? Okay. Sterling FinCom voted unanimously no on Article 2. We did that not because of the minimum local contribution, not because of Sterling's share of the debt load, or not because of Sterling's share of the transportation. It was all about the discretionary piece. Article 2 includes the district request for a discretionary increase over 17%. We are seeking compromise on the size of this increase to match the current 3.5% rate of inflation. As you can see in this first slide, the enrollment has declined by over 16% in the past 6 years, while the discretionary budget request has increased over 27%. To put things into perspective, this year's discretionary increase equals the entire Sterling municipal town budget increase, just this discretionary item. This year, our cherry sheet proceeds, our cannabis impact fee, and other local receipts are down, and we project a slowdown in new growth revenues this year as well. We offset those decreases by drawing an additional $150,000 from the ambulance fees and $200,000 from stabilization. Drawing on stabilization is extraordinary, and with continued use, we'll run out of that savings account. We will point out that, and this is particularly noteworthy, that all Sterling department managers did an excellent job living within very tight budget constraints this year. That increase was 3.29%. They did an admirable job. For over 8 years, Sterling's excess levy capacity averaged above $1 million, as you can see in this chart. However, in 3 short years since FY22, that excess capacity has dropped from 1.6 million to a projected 400K for this year. It would have gone even lower had we not used the stabilization to prop up that excess levy capacity. If this cycle repeats in next year, FY26, this number may well swing negative, making override a sure bet. We have a school spending problem. Unless some moderation in district expense growth occurs, we'll face 2 ugly choices next year. That will be to vote for a 2.5 override that will increase our levy limit, and that's likely by a large amount to allow for large property tax increases, or live within available means, which may mean big cuts to our municipal services to fit within the available leftover budget. If a 2.5 override does not get approved to address this, unless school expenses are brought into line with revenues, you can expect this to be a 3 to 4 year rinse and repeat cycle. I don't think we want to get into that cycle. You're seeing that cycle on the chart right now. If the district would compromise and would accept a proposal, you can see that our excess levy capacity turns around and moves us comfortably up to about 750K. Not the million that we used to operate at, but a whole lot better. You can help fix this with a no vote on the district budget. It'll take 2 towns to vote no to bring the district to the negotiating table. It takes 4 towns voting yes to approve a district budget. Thus, any 2 towns can veto the budget. This year, Sterling is not the only district town facing this school budget problem. Just about every town in the district is. So in summary, you have nothing to lose by voting no and possibly a lot to gain. If we are the only town to vote no, then unfortunately the school budget will pass and we'll be stuck with the current situation. If one other town joins Sterling in a no vote, then the district will have 30 days to present a compromised budget, which would require approval at a special town meeting. This is the desired outcome that FinCom wants. FinCom strongly recommends you vote no on Article 2.
So please, I just want to clarify, we're voting whether or not, we will be voting after discussion, whether or not to amend Article 2 to reflect the price in Article 29. That will be the motion. Are we okay with amending it? And then we'll go to an Article 2 vote. So I just want to be clear. I want to clarify.
In 7 Shady Lane.
Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, all of these increases over the years by the WRSD have been compounded. I warned about that years ago, and I have some figures to put how we're getting screwed in stark relief. The school district was founded in 1955. It took 60 years for the school district to achieve a total budget of $81.3 million. That was in fiscal year 2015. This year, the total budget requested by the school district is $121.9 million. So in other words, 60 years to get the 81 million, 10 years for next fiscal year to add on another 60 million. That's what these 4.5 and 4.7 and 4.9% increases compounded get you. In the meantime, while the budget has gone up, requested budget has gone up 60 million in a mere 10 years, I want to tell you about the enrollment. Peak enrollment in the school district occurred in fiscal year 2010. There were 7,493 students then. This fiscal year, according to DESE, the total enrollment was 6,676, down 817 students, well more than 10% during the same period that the budgets have been skyrocketing. According to the school district's own statement on the website, the student-teacher ratio is 15-1. That means with a drop of 817 students, there are now 54.5 empty classrooms. There's a statute, 71, chapter 71, let me get it here. Section 42 on dropping enrollments, and I would say the ethical and moral duty of a school committee and a school administration, what they should do. This is what the statutes, that section says. Nothing in this section or section 41 shall affect the right of a superintendent to lay off teachers pursuant to reductions in force or reorganizations resulting from declining enrollment or other budgetary reasons. They don't want to cut anybody. They should have cut 10% of the payroll, more than 10%, based on that 817 student drop. What they're doing is, what the school committee and the administration doing what they're doing is bending over, kissing the collective bargaining unit butts, and then passing the costs on to us. We are not in a statewide race to screw taxpayers. The statewide figures are meaningless, all right? Because they're probably more out of control than the WRSD. But these figures that I just
Mr.
recited
Giddings, it's been 3 minutes.
show that the WRSD is out of control. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Linda Woodland for Deborah Lane. I'm a member of the school committee. I just want to make sure that it's clear that if this motion to amend passes, this is the equivalent of a no vote, and it would have to go back to the school committee. In order to talk about the amount of decrease we're looking at for this proposal, it would require laying off a sizable number of teachers. It would decimate the district. It would be next to impossible to climb out of it. Every cut that would be made would be then calculated against our percent enrollment. So you have to, in order to have the savings that the FinCom is suggesting, you have to overcut in order for Sterling to get to see that. In terms of dropped enrollment here, I believe that the number for Sterling was about 23 students, so roughly 2 students per classroom. That's not enough to get rid of a classroom teacher. It doesn't really make sense when you look at how education is actually performed. And I would also like to point out that our students have rights and they're not allowed to vote. They know that when they walk into their school building, they're going to get the best education that they can possibly receive with the resources available to them. But at the end of the day, they can't be here to defend what they need. And that is up to us. I had people ahead of me who defended the budgets for my own education through public schools, and now I see it as my responsibility to the future generation to make sure that our students have what they need. So I would strongly recommend a no vote on this motion to amend because it would reduce what is possible for our students. It would require a serious loss of access when they're already not getting what their peers in other districts are getting. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Dawn Hartnett again. So just to kind of put that in perspective, thank you, in terms of numbers. So if this number stays the same on Article 2, Sterling would be paying $15,507 per pupil. There are 883 students in from Sterling. If we drop it, like they want to, it means $12,000 per student. I want to know why no one is complaining about Monty Tech, who's asking us for an increase, and they're going to bill us for a mere 56 students. I want to be clear, 56 students go from Sterling to Monty Tech, and they want $1 million. That is $20,000 per student. So I'm not sure how you guys can be okay saying that $15,000 per student is out of control. When Monty Tech gets $20,000 per student, it's a great school. I'm so super excited. I don't want to be, but I don't think people understand the numbers. So please vote no on the current article on 29, and yes for number 2. Thank you.
Oh, I'd like to recognize the Finance Committee, please.
Just a couple of comments. First of all, why are we not against the Massachusetts request for their budget item? When Monty Tech presents a budget to the towns, there is no, let me repeat, no discretionary spending included. All of the costs that are handed down to the towns are mandated either by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, affectionately known as DESE, plus our share of the transportation cost and our share of the debt service. That is the fundamental difference between the two budgets. Second of all, addressing the motion that's on the table right now, we are not in favor of replacing Article 2 as it currently exists with Article 29 as it currently exists. I don't want anybody to get the impression we are. That is not at all what we are looking for. So I believe the motion is to replace Article 2 with the dollar amounts in Article 29 as it currently exists. That is nothing that the Finance Committee is in favor of. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Yes, Laura Ritchie, Bean Road. I have a copy of something here from the Wachusett Regional School District. I didn't see it on Dr. Riley's slideshow up there. It's a FY25 budget by appropriation, and on here is a debt service that went from $2,261,000 to in the red, okay, which is a minus, okay, for $1,399,000, which is a 61.87% reduction, okay? So I'd like to know what was paid off, okay? How come that's on there? What's the debt service paid off, okay? And it seems like the biggest increase on this chart is for special ed tuitions, which increased by an exorbitant 52.67%, up $1,350,000. So you flip-flopped, okay? You paid off a debt for 61.87% and you put it into special ed. So that makes your budget look like a 4.97 increase when it's really 17%. So I don't know if somebody can explain to that. Maybe Mr. Riley has that on his slideshow. He can bring it back up.
Dr. Riley.
So it's actually right here on the sheet that we handed out at the meeting? No, I'm happy to say anything about it right now. And so the debt service reduction was 20 years ago. The high school had a lot of work done on it. They had a lot of refurbishment, and that debt came off the books this year. But every single appropriation in the budget that was presented exhaustively to the select board and also to the FinCom, they were all marked on this sheet, which was available to everybody when they came in. We're not trying to hide anything. You can see it right here if you didn't get it.
Thank you, Dr. Riley.
Mm-hmm. You also asked about special ed, out-of-district tuitions. I'm happy to speak to it. So actually, special education out-of-district tuitions for the district are about $10 million. And so we don't pay for them all out of the general budget. We pay them through things like circuit breaker and also through grants. The last couple of years, and one of the things I'd always acknowledge for the district is that our financial protocols and processes weren't what they should have been. And one of the things that we saw last year was that these special education out-of-district tuitions weren't being properly funded. So this year in the budget, we did properly fund them. Last year, we had to approve excess and deficiency, request school committee to make an additional appropriation to cover those costs. They traditionally hadn't been properly allocated for in the budget, and so we made that correction. One thing I'd say that had made out-of-district special education tuitions more expensive is 2 years ago, or last year, the state approved an increase of 14% in their tuitions. This year, it was an additional close to 5%, and so they've gone up almost 20% in what these programs can charge. The other thing I'd share about out-of-district placements are these are legally entitled placements. They're not decisions by the school district. What happens is we have IEP meetings, and basically a determination is made that a child can't have their needs or services met in district, and so we have to pay for their tuition out of district, and that's what those numbers represent. It doesn't have, it's not a cost that we have control over. Those kids need those services to get their free and appropriate education, and that's why we provide them. But it's not a line item or an appropriation that we have control over.
Thank you. FinCom.
George Handy, Chair of the Finance Committee. I'd like to move the motion as it currently exists.
We have to deal with the amendment first. So are you calling the question to go with that? Can I have a second for calling the question? Second. Thank you. So for this, just so you all know, we're voting whether or not to vote. Okay? Just so I'm sure we're all clear. So the voting to call the question.
Point of order, could you actually read what the amendment actually is?
Sure, I can read the amendment. I think we need to vote first.
Well, he's asking a point of order,
Yeah.
so you can answer that question.
And
And then
okay.
we'll call the, then you can vote on the call.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is
Motion to amend.
Article 2 by reducing $13,693,038 to $10,645,733. That's the motion on the floor. But not the motion on the floor now. We're calling the question now. So now we're voting to vote, okay? So you're voting whether or not we should vote on the amendment. Voting starts now. I need to say those numbers. The vote is closed. And it passes by a 2/3 majority, 192 to 61. That being said, now we're voting on the amendment, just so everybody's clear. We're voting to amend Article 2 to reduce $13,693,038 to $10,645,733. Simple majority for this one. Voting starts now.
So if it fails, the main motion's on the table.
The vote's closed. Does not pass, 128 to 173. All right, so if you all stay with me now, the next motion on the floor is the original Article 2 that has moved that the town raise and appropriate $13,693,038 for the town's contribution to the Wachusett Regional School District. Do I have a motion? Do I have, hold on one second.
It was already moved in second, but that's the only way you can.
Got it. It was already moved in second. I apologize. That was a point of order. So we can have discussion on Article 2. Finance Committee.
Madam Moderator, the Finance Committee requests an amendment to Article 2. First, in warrant line item 214, we request that the amount of $2,977,305 be changed to $2,630,193. Second, in warrant line item 212, we request that the amount of $13,693,038 be changed to $13,345,926. This amendment request stems from the request made by the Sterling Finance Committee to the superintendent in a letter dated April 12, 2024, to reduce the discretionary contribution from 17+% to 3.5%, reflecting the current U.S. 12-month inflation rate. The amended amount requested in warrant line 214 represents Sterling's share of such adjustment in accordance with Section 4 of the WRSD regional agreement. And I have a amended version if you would care to have that.
Please. And do I have a second on that motion to amend? Great. So now we can have discussion. Keep the discussion to this motion and new information, please.
Is it good for me to go, or are you reading that first?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Alan Levin, 55 Rowley Hill Road. So full disclosure, I have a toddler, so slightly immediately invested in this. But with that being said, you know, I've been a mentor over at Neshoba, the robotics team, for about 15 plus years. And I also am a hiring manager for about a 20,000 person Fortune 500 company. And so I can kind of see education from, you know, early in its inception to what it can culminate to when you go to hire people. And I hire not only for my own team, but I'm a part of a variety of committees and advise on hiring throughout the entire company. And it's just really apparent to me, almost immediately interviewing, especially people right out of college, what sort of educational background they have. And people that start at a very young age with more opportunities, both directly within the classroom as well as extracurricular, they are so much stronger and more promising. And honestly, it is incredibly challenging for me to hire people locally, either locally here within all of Massachusetts or even across the whole East Coast. And I just think that education of all of these things is such a good use of money. It helps not only the students for their entire lives, but it helps whatever communities they end up living in, and then investing their own taxes back into those towns. So I'm really in favor of fully funding per the district's request. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to remind, the motion though is on the floor, and I just had it. The town council stole it from me, but it is reducing the $13 million ask $300,000. So it's another reduction amendment, and I just want to make sure our comment is stuck to that.
Linda Woodland, 4 Deborah Lane, still on the school committee. I just want to make sure that everybody is clear that if this amendment passes, if there is any reduction whatsoever, it is still the effect of a no vote and would need to go back to the school committee for renegotiation. It would still, if other towns similarly change the district request, it would also be looking at severely limiting what we can provide for our students, which is the whole reason why the education system exists. Thank you.
24 Meeting House Hill Road. I read in the Globe 2 days ago that the April budget came in and there was an excess of $1 billion from the millionaire's tax that has to be earmarked for either transportation or education. And as you pointed out before, that, you know, the budget is going back, you know, on statewide, and I'm just curious if that's going to have an impact, if this might be a moot point. And I too support education, and I would like to fully fund the proposition. That's it.
May I just make one more quick comment, Madam Moderator?
Please.
Based on the recommendation of $300,000 less, just to play that out, what it would mean to our staffing is that's approximately, just for the Sterling portion of the budget, it would mean cutting 5 teachers. And so just think of the teachers in Choxet and Houghton, and you'd have 5 fewer next year. And we talk about staffing. Right now, Houghton, it still doesn't have a 1.0 guidance counselor. And so these are choices that would have a severe impact on the services your kids receive. And please remember, as Ms. Woodland said, to pass this means that it's a no vote on the budget. Thank you.
I'm recognizing the FinCom.
George Handy, Chair of the Finance Committee. First, I'd like everybody to acknowledge the fact that the Finance Committee is a staunch supporter of education. Make no bones about that. Second of all, our proposal is not cutting anything. I want you to understand that. There are two fundamental parts of an operational budget for the school departments, not just Wachusett, every school district. One, which is the largest, is called the foundation budget, which is constructed by the Department of Education or Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They have a formula, and they come up with a budget number called the foundation budget, which is defined as the minimum required to give an adequate education for the students. That budget number for FY25 for Wachusett Regional School District is $86 million and change. That's the foundation budget. That's the operational budget. They are academic professionals. I am not. Nobody on this committee is an academic professional. We don't profess to know how to run a school and what it takes. We trust DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They are educational professionals, just as our administration at Wachusett is. So we have two different educational professionals coming up with two separate budgets. So we are not arguing with what DESE comes up with. We are not looking to cut anything. DESE actually this year, in their formulations of the foundation budget, has commanded that the 5 towns in the Wachusett Regional District actually contribute to the district $2 million more than they did last year. That's right. These 5 towns have to pony up another $2 million more than they did last year. That's state mandated. On top of that, the school is getting an additional $220,000 of state aid. So before any increases on discretionary spending, they are coming up with Hello? They are coming up with $2,300,000. On top of that, we are looking to give the discretionary spending an additional 3.5% over last year. That is a substantial increase.
I think it's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
you've exceeded time. Thanks.
Jim Gettin, 7 Shady Lane. Ladies and gentlemen, if you go to the WRSD website and look at the staff roster, you'll see that they have 1,000 employees plus or minus. That runs 21 pages, single spaced. They have 1 employee for approximately every 6.6 or 6.7 students. Given the language that I read previously from Chapter 71, Section 42, and the more than 10% drop in enrollment since fiscal year 2010, they should have been cutting staff and they should have been cutting teachers. They had a moral obligation and an ethical obligation to the taxpayers in the district to cut in accordance with the enrollment drop, and they have not done that. They added 8 last year, 8 employees. Now they whine about having to make a cut. I say approve this amendment and let them cut, make them cut. Thank you.
Dr. Riley.
I just wanted to refer back to the earlier presentation I made. 98% of the school districts in Massachusetts have to spend more than the foundation budget. The average is 40% more than the foundation budget. Our most recent data has us 25% more than the foundation budget. We are not spending to the state average. I'm not complaining about that. I appreciate all the support we've gotten from the towns, but I don't feel like this is being represented fairly. This is not a case where we have exorbitant numbers of staff. You saw the ratios. That was from October of this year, and we're well below the state average in almost every single personnel position. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm limiting the rest of this discussion, at least to new information, please.
I'll make this quick. Joe Sovas, 7 Cynthia Lane. I sat on the school committee for quite a while. Also sat at that table there for a number of years on the FinCom. I can tell you that I have a history of supporting the school system in the school district. I could tell we have a child who went through the system. She got a great education here. People want to live here because of our school system, our safety and soundness. This is a great place to live. It helps us as a community to have a school system that thrives. And I'm supporting this budget.
All right, that being said, discussion is closed, and here's what we're voting for again. We're voting to amend to reduce $13,693,038 to $13,345,926, which is a delta of $347,112. So I just want you to all know we're voting again whether or not we want to amend Article 2 in that regard. Got it? Okay. Voting starts now. Simple majority. Voting is closed. It passed 138 to 124. So Article 2 is now amended. Now, let's go to, hold on one second.
All you're doing now is voting as to whether or not they're going to raise and appropriate that new amended number. So you have to encumber that money now.
Okay, so now Article 2 is back up, and it's whether or not we will raise and appropriate $13,345,926 for the town's contribution to the Wachusett Regional School District. Do I have any further discussion on the motion? I'm going to defer to Town Council.
Good evening, everybody. Madam Moderator, through you. Just so that the meeting's aware and the body's aware, Sterling is one of 5 communities in Wachusett Regional. If the other 4 communities all vote in favor of the number as presented by the regional committee, then the budget's approved. And despite the reduction here this evening, if it's in fact voted in favor by this body, the town would have to reconvene a special town meeting to appropriate the difference that was just voted tonight. I just want to make sure that the meeting's aware of that there would be a need for a subsequent meeting to appropriate the $347,112 difference if the 4 other communities vote their budgets as presented by the regional committee. Thank you.
I don't see any additional discussion on Article 2. With that being said, the vote, sorry.
I just want to make sure, so you said that if there, Linda Woodland, 4 Deborah Lane, through the moderator, if this is approved now with the amendment and the next 4 towns vote to approve the budget, then Sterling still has to come together, have the expense of another special town meeting, have to have quorum again and vote through this again before July 1st? Yes?
Yes.
In that case, I would make a motion to reconsider the prior vote.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to reconsider unamending, I don't even know if that's a word, the,
Let's take a look to see on the bylaws if we can even do that.
we're just checking on the bylaws real quick, just to be sure that we can do that.
Okay, so it's appropriate. It's before the body.
Okay, so do I have a second on the second? Okay, great. Do I have a discussion on the motion to unamend the amendment to Article 2? Oh, voting to reconsider, sorry.
Linda Woodland for Deborah Lane, just because of making sure that there's not undue hurdles. I think that knowing that we have to call another special town meeting, which is at Sterling's expense to put this on, we should just go forward with what has been researched.
Thank you. Seems like Mr. Gettings would like to speak again.
Yes, I would, Madam Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Gettins, 7 Shady Lane. This is our opportunity to stiffen the spines of some other towns in the district. So I ask you to vote no on the reconsideration and go forward with the Article 2 as amended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Ken Stockwell, Justice Hill Road. I just want to remember that people, I'm a new resident to Sterling relatively recently. When people are looking to buy properties amongst other districts, education is probably one of the strongest things that people consider. And if this proceeds and you lower the staff commitments at the schools, that could potentially impact the ratings of the school districts, which could negatively affect people wanting to come to this town of Sterling. And if people are looking to sell properties in the future, and if you have a lower town rating, you might get lower property values than what you were expecting. Just want to make people aware of that as well.
Thank you. I'm just going to recognize the Finance Committee. Can we just keep it brief? We've been talking about this motion for like, I don't know, an hour, 15 minutes.
Just a quick comment. We were notified by the Paxton Finance Committee chair that their Finance Committee had also voted to not approve the Wachusett Regional School District budget as presented, and I believe they're meeting tonight. So if they're a second town, we shouldn't be waiting too long. Of course, there's 3 others. I know Princeton has postponed their town meeting until, I believe, June now, which is kind of incredible.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we can go to this gentleman, please.
Micah Pettis from Wiles Road. I've lived here my whole life, basically, and I do septic and excavation. So when people go to move in or out, a huge factor is how much the excise taxes are. And I've heard many people say, oh, I wouldn't move to Sterling, I wouldn't move to Princeton, the taxes are high. Yeah, we have a great school system, we have a great community, but you're gonna be paying for this for a lot longer than the couple $100,000 less. So I'd urge people to think about the future, not just the school.
Thank you. Please.
Larry Pape, Elliott Road. Just a comment about attracting families to the town of Sterling. If you think about it, on average, let's say a new family moves in with 2 students age children. That's an additional $34,000 of expenses the town would have to collect. There's no way that the average tax bill collects $34,000 from a house. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just limiting this to discussion to reconsider again.
Right. Eric Pettis, 35 Wiles Road. Lived in Sterling since 1999. I just want to bring to everybody's attention the impact to people on a fixed income, or people that work that get a 2 or 3% raise every year. I get it that we want a good education, we want good school systems, but there are people that just won't be able to afford the increase in taxes. And based on the numbers that I saw put up on the screen, if this isn't resolved this year, we're going to be rinse, wash, repeat for the next 3 to 4 years. And there's more to do about running an efficient business than cutting people. I worked at NIPRO for 17 years as a senior executive. I know how to run a business. I would encourage the school district to learn likewise. Thank you.
I just want to make sure you're going to bring up new information.
Great. Patricia Ward, 24 Meeting House Hill Road. I know FinCom said no, but the select board recommended, and I just was wondering if the select board would like to comment on why it recommended.
Yes, the select board did choose to support the school system. We obviously understood what this present administration walked into. Last year, they started to do the fix. They're still in the process of the fix. We also decided that it shouldn't be the students that suffer because the adults have made a wrong turn. I think we support it because we do trust in Dr. Riley and his staff at this time, and our school committee.
Thank you. So discussion's closed, and we're moving now to reconsider the motion, which was the amendment. So if you want to go back to the amendment again and vote on that again, you would vote a yes to reconsider. So hang on one second, I just got to change this so that we know what we're voting on officially. So just gives them 1 second.
The gentleman there is saying it can't be changed.
Oh, okay.
So you either can take a voice vote.
Voice vote?
Yeah, on the motion to
I think because we've already heard all of this and read all.
And to reconsider, voting starts now. Simple majority. Voting is closed. Does not pass. So now we're back to Article 2. How many times have I said Article 2 tonight? I just want to point that out. Back to Article 2, where the town is now, it's an amended motion to move that the town raise and appropriate $13,345,926 for the town's contribution to the Wachusett Regional School District. Do we have any new discussion on this motion? There being none. Oh, we got one.
Becky Moisen for Cynthia Lane. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question, maybe of the school committee or Dr. Riley. Because the number has changed, if we vote yes to the new number, does that still mean a no to the school committee because it's a different number?
That's correct.
And if we vote no, then it still, either way right now, does it still have to go to the school committee because we changed the number?
Either way, it's a no.
Can I motion to reconsider another time? Okay.
No. So with that being said, finally, Article 2 is up for a vote. The voting starts now. Simple majority again. Voting is closed. Does not pass. 142 to 145.
Appropriated nothing.
So this just means we've appropriated nothing. All right, moving on to Article 3. We have a motion. I'm going to entertain a motion that the town raise and appropriate $1,132,732 for the town's assessment to Montechusett Regional Vocation Technical School. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion on Monty Tech? There being none, there's a vote on the floor for Monty Tech, and voting starts now. Vote is closed. Passes 212 to 71. Article 4. We're moving that the town raise and appropriate $107,740 to fund an additional full-time firefighter paramedic position in the Sterling Fire Department. Do I have a motion?
Moderator David Hurlbut, Fire Chief. I make the motion on Article 4.
And do I have a second? Now discussion on the motion. Fire Department, would you like to go first? Why don't you go ahead?
I'll defer to the Finance Committee.
Okay. Finance Committee, do you want to go first? Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to? Yes.
Yeah.
George Handy, Chair of the Finance Committee. I'd like to introduce Lynn Shepard. She is our liaison representative to the Fire Department from the Finance Committee. She has a brief proposal for you.
I guess, first of all, I'd like to say we have an outstanding fire department. FinCom does not support hiring any new employees in fiscal '25. Our personnel costs are 2/3 of our municipal operating budget. For FY '25, a lot of effort was made, successful effort, to move costs out of our operating budget. Unfortunately, most of those actions taken to accomplish this are not repeatable in fiscal '26. Salary, wages, insurance, and benefits have grown an average of 8% per year over the past 5 years. Adding new employees drives cost growth, and not just the obvious personnel costs, but also capital spending for facilities, vehicles, and equipment. We are required to have a separate warrant article for any new full-time employee request, so that you, the citizens of the town, have the opportunity to clearly vote yay or nay to the request. In fiscal '25, our total dollar cost growth is 40% greater than our forecasted dollar revenue growth. FY '25 revenue growth forecast is $867,450, or a 3.1% increase. The FY '25 cost growth with the added firefighter is $1,211,340, or a 4.41% increase. And in fiscal '26, the revenue growth forecast is even a little less, 2.57% increase. It's important to keep cost growth in line with revenue growth. This requires tough decisions on town priorities, wants, needs, and benefits. If we want to add new cost, we need to identify where equivalent expenses can be cut or revenue grown. Our community of fire departments have a long history of sharing personnel and equipment resources through their mutual aid and their call firefighter programs. In 2023, Sterling had 878 calls to provide mutual aid to other towns. 91% of those calls were for medical assistance. In the same period, Sterling placed 61 calls for mutual aid. 100% were for fire incidents. From these numbers, I think you can conclude that Sterling is well serviced by our existing fire department staff. Several towns are facing 2.5, you can't hear?
They asked me to.
Oh, put it closer, sorry. Several local towns are facing a Prop 2.5 override this year. Sterling will not be one of them, but our actions this year have a big impact on fiscal 26. In 25, we eroded our excess levy capacity and are close to our levy limit. We've posted an article from the Division of Local Services explaining those terms and Prop 2.5. It's on the FinCom page of our town website. I won't try to explain them here, but you should be aware a Prop 2.5 override requires a majority approval vote via a town-wide ballot, which usually follows any budget approvals at town meeting. If an override is not approved by the town-wide ballot, and it has been defeated by other towns this year, then the town budget must be cut. If the regional school budget has already been passed at town meeting, then all cuts must come out of the municipal operating budget. So even if the schools increased by 1%, 4.41% or whatever, all of the excess monies have to come out of your municipal operating budget. The 17% increase in WRSD discretionary spend put us dangerously close to needing a Prop 2.5 override this year. Town personnel costs grew 5.14% in FY25 without any staff additions. So our personnel costs are already growing at a high rate. And this is why FinCom recommends a no vote on Article 4.
Thank you. I'll recognize the fire department.
Madam Moderator, before I introduce Lieutenant Kokonak to go over some statistics, I just want to address the mutual aid. That seems to be the focus on not wanting to support the fire department. So I'm not denying the 800 calls for mutual aid, but out of that, 797 were for mutual aid paramedics to other communities that don't have paramedic service. 302 times they were canceled en route, driving that number down to 400 plus. We do over 2,000 calls a year, and keep in mind that when we go mutual aid, last year we made 102,000 in revenue providing mutual aid paramedics. We contribute this year 650,000. Oh, my time up?
No, your time. Your time's not up. It was a technical issue.
To offset,
I wouldn't do it that way.
To offset the operating budget in Article 1, we are transferring $650,000 from ambulance receipts. These positions are going to guarantee we're approaching to guarantee 2 full-time firefighters around the clock. We're doing it for the 2 shifts up until 6 p.m. every day. We're trying to provide the same service to our residents 24 hours a day. That's where we're attempting to get to. And at this time,
we're having microphone issues today.
I'm just going to have Lieutenant Kokonak, who is the one that drafted the information that was sent out to all the residents, just to briefly provide you some data in regards to this.
My name is Tom Kokonak. I'm a lieutenant with the fire department. We put a lot of information out over the past few weeks on our social media, talking about how staffing issues are starting to affect the fire department. I think it's important to understand that this problem is not unique to Sterling. It's something that's affecting fire departments across our entire region. This past year, West Boylston funded 3 new firefighter paramedic spots to try to deal with these same issues. They couldn't get 3 qualified paramedics to apply for the job. Currently, they can no longer provide paramedic coverage 24 hours a day because of the state of the job market, if you will, in the fire service. Over the winter, Lancaster lost some of their most active EMTs to retirements, and their fire chief resigned. Because of the impact of those retirements, they're being forced to use the fire chief's salary to fund new full-time firefighter positions and are making the police chief operate the fire department. In both West Boylston and Lancaster, deferring the problem has not only affected the ability to get fire trucks and ambulances out the door, but it's has cost taxpayers significantly more money due to the loss of EMS billing revenue and the impact of having to spend to hire multiple positions in a single fiscal year. Sterling is currently experiencing issues with turnout and response time. Starting next year, some of our most active members are going to start retiring out, and the impact of that is going to be significant. In anticipation of this, we've put together a plan to manage it in small bites over the course of several fiscal years in order to minimize the cost impact to taxpayers and to protect the level of service that we provide. The passage of Article 4 at tonight's meeting is an important part of that. It's expected to impact the average quarterly tax bill next year by about $8.
Thank you. Do I have any further discussion on the motion? Okay, looks like we have no further discussion on this motion. So now the motion for the fire department is up for vote. Sorry, the vote starts now. Don't worry, you'll only be able to vote once. It's fine. After I open it. Voting is closed. It's approved. Articles 5 to 15 are putting a motion forward to move that the town combine the Articles 5 to 15 into a consent calendar and to approve those articles that have not been requested to be held in one vote. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion on Articles 5 to 15 and the consent agenda?
The only thing I would offer, Madam Moderator, is just to make sure that Article 5 is just 100,000. It's not or any other sum.
Town Council just clarified that Article 5 is just at 100,000. It's not or any sum. So with no discussion, the vote to approve the consent agenda and approve Articles 5 through 15, the vote starts now. Voting is closed. Passes 213 to 40. Article 16. I'm entertaining a motion that the town vote to appropriate $1,459,016 from Water Department revenue and the sum of $40,000 from Water Enterprise retained earnings for a total appropriation of $1,499,016 to operate Water Enterprise Fund for fiscal year 2025. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have discussion? There being none, vote on Article 16 starts now.
Right? It is a little steamy here.
Voting's closed. Passes. Article 17. Move that the town vote to approve capital expenditures for the water department and to appropriate the sum of $1,582,000 for such purposes, that to meet this appropriation, $282,000 shall be transferred from the water retained earnings, and the treasurer collector, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow the sum of $1,300,000 under applicable statutes and as set forth in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Any discussion? Vote for Article 17 starts now. Voting's closed. It's approved. I just had to look and see where I was. Article 18. I'll entertain a motion that the town vote to transfer a sum totaling $892,796 using free cash in the amount of $113,296, the capital investment fund in the amount of $689,500, sale of used equipment in the amount of $32,000, and cemetery lot sales in the amount of $58,000 for capital items as presented in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Any discussion? This one requires a 2/3 vote. The voting starts now. Votes closed. It passes. Article 19, move that the town appropriate $1 million for the replacement of certain town roads, sidewalks, and other infrastructure, including all costs incidental or related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow said sum under applicable statutes and as set forth in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion? Yes.
Laura Ritchie, 50 Mead Road. You know this thing that happened downtown with the parking spots? They're too small. I'm wondering if this money is going to be used to paint the lines bigger so that people can parallel park their cars. You got spots in front of the the town hall that are bigger
I think we can ask
spots on the streets.
I think we can ask the question whether this funding is going to be used for Main Street parking. If anybody has an answer to that.
Ryan.
Yes.
Madam Moderator, Ryan Meridian, DPW Superintendent. This money will not be used for Main Street parking. It'll be used to pave roads that need to be paved. The Main Street project is a separate project that the town's working through. This money will not be used for that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? With that said, voting on Article 19 starts now. Voting's closed. Passes with a 2/3 majority. Article 20, move that the town appropriate $350,000 for the replacement of windows at the Butterick Municipal Building, including all costs incidental or related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow said sum under applicable statutes and is set forth in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion on windows? Yes, ma'am.
Laura Ritchie, 50 Bean Road. What's the matter with the windows that are there?
1936.
I know, but they fit the building, okay? The windows that you're gonna get today, they're gonna be a piece of junk and they're gonna fall apart. Okay, just like, you know, Anderson windows, they're junk.
Thank you, thank you. Do I have an answer on why the windows need to be replaced?
Madam Moderator?
Yes.
Bill Caldwell, Town Administrator. Energy efficiency is one of them, and also many of them are deteriorating and inoperable.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? Great. With that said, we have Article 20 voting starts now. Voting is closed. Article 21, move that the town vote to amend the... Oh, I'm sorry. The vote passed. Thanks, everyone. 2/3 majority. Yes?
Linda Woodland for Deborah Lane. I'd like to make a motion to reconsider Article 2 as voted.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to reconsider Article 2 as voted. Do I have a second? Great. Do we have any further discussion on this motion?
I urge everybody to say no, okay?
I didn't recognize you 1 second. I was answering the question over here. So under our bylaws, you can reconsider a motion twice. The second time requires a 2/3 majority vote to reconsider. Anyone can do that.
Laura Ritchie, 50 Bean Road. I urge everybody to vote no on no matter what you say about this, okay? Because you got a guy sitting in here that's looking for, in the coming years, to build yourself a $10 million DPW building. So what are you going to say to him?
Thank you, thank you. Next.
Tim Hardy, Beaman Road. According to the Labor Department, it's like the inflation rate is 3.5% for the past 12 months ending March. Next inflation data is coming out on May 15th. It's at 3.2% currently, and yet the school is asking for a lot more than that. I think we made it very clear that it's like, yes, education is important, but as one gentleman had pointed out already, it should be run more efficiently, and they should get their expenses in line. It should not be on the taxpayers totally to be funding their expenses when they're not really being, I think, totally accountable.
Thank you.
Eric Pettis, 35 Wiles Road, again. We don't live in a banana republic, and the last time I checked, you couldn't vote 3 times for the president. What the hell is this?
This is in our town, it's in our town bylaws, sir.
And I would add, we took a vote. How many people that voted are now no longer here? You're rigging the system.
It's part of town meeting, sir. Yes.
Linda Woodland for Deborah Lane. My rationale here in doing this is, again, I don't want to come back here before July 1st. No matter what, it's going to be back here, and Paxton just passed the budget, so we already have one who is going forward. All right, so I want to make sure that our Sterling residents have the facts on the ground as they actually are, and that I'm glad that the gentleman brought up the inflation rate. One of the issues that we have had with the state budget that our DESE professionals have decreed is that despite years after year of 8% felt impression, they have given themselves a sales price on paying local education and capped it at 4% earlier, 4.5. This year, despite inflation rate actually felt at being closer to 3%, DESE decided to set it at 1.35%. Therefore, the state was given a sales price on actually funding local education. That is why there is a difference in what Sterling is being asked to provide. But it does not have anything to do with suddenly creating extra expenses for the school district to bring along. It is all about taking a steady ride into the future for our students. It is all with the state creating a manufactured fiscal cliff. So I think that with these facts, with the knowledge that another town meeting is another expense that proves nothing, and we have a budget that was well-researched, well-supported, now that we have new administration. And so I would urge everybody to vote to reconsider the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. With there being no further discussion, yes, sir.
Harry Pape, Elliott Road. I just say we've been through this in the early 2000s, and the problem is when the state comes up short in terms of increases, the onus always falls, the school committee always comes to the towns to make up that difference. And when the towns vote for it, the state says, oh, got away with it again. So I'd ask you to keep that in mind as you consider this vote. And if you look at the numbers, it's an unsustainable increase that they're asking for. And to take money that was going towards capital improvements, i.e. bonds that were paid off, and put it into the operating budget is not good fiscal management.
Thank you.
Leslie Mason, Sandy Ridge Road. Yes, the state came up short, and yes, the town is asking for money. We are punishing our children who live here in this town because they are already lower than the rest of the state. We are already behind the rest of the state for school spend per student, per child. You keep doing this and our children will suffer, not only in our school systems, but they will suffer coming out.
Thank you. Okay, with that said, make sure we're discussing newer things that we haven't heard in the hour and 15 minutes we discussed Article 2.
Bob Sarafcon, Woodside Drive. I believe what I understood is that we have already amended Article 2 to an amount lower than what the district asked for.
Correct.
So whether or not Article 2 passes, we've said no to the district's request.
If we reconsider,
so I think yes or no.
If we, point of order here, if you reconsider Article 2, anyone on the floor can amend Article 2.
Thank you.
Yes.
Madam Moderator, Jim Gettin, 7 Shady Lane. All the spenders here are equating quantity with quality, and that's a false premise. Thank you.
Thank you.
To follow up on Mr. Gettin's remark, my name is Marion Larson, 11 Matthew Lane, and quality does mean a lot, and the Wachusett district is very highly rated educationally. We're getting good value for what we're paying now. I do not support reconsidering the article.
Thank you. Okay, so this time, if we're voting to reconsider the motion, it requires a 2/3 vote under our town bylaws. The motion to reconsider Article 2 vote starts now. The vote is closed. Does not pass. 77 to 153. Moving on to Article 21. I'll entertain a motion that we move that the town vote to amend the general bylaws, Chapter 201, Attachment 1, classification plan as presented in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have discussion? Okay. Voting for Article 21 starts now. Vote is closed. Simple majority. It passes. Article 22, I'll entertain a motion that the town vote to amend the general bylaws, Chapter 201, Attachment 2, compensation schedule as presented in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have discussion? Vote on Article 22 starts now. Vote is closed. Simple majority. Passes. Article 23. I'll entertain a motion that the town vote to amend the general bylaws, Chapter 201, Attachment 3, compensation schedule call fire force as presented in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion? The vote on Article 23 starts now. Vote is closed. Vote passes. Article 24, I'd entertain a motion that the town vote to amend the general bylaws, Chapter 201, Attachment 4, stipend positions as presented in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion? That being said, the vote for Article 24 starts now. Vote is closed. Simple majority passes. Article 25, I'll entertain a motion that the town vote to amend general bylaws, Chapter 201, Attachment 6, miscellaneous positions as presented in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do we have any discussion? Okay, the vote on Article 25 starts now. Voting's closed. Simple majority. Vote passes. Article 26, entertain a motion that the town vote to approve Article 26 as presented in the warrant. Second. Any discussion?
Richard Lane, Tanglewood Road, current member of the Board of Health, and I am on the ballot on Monday for the 3-year term. I believe Sterling should vote to accept Article 26 because the irresponsible and arrogant actions of the Board of Health show they need to be regulated. The Board of Health enacted the deep observation hole regulation without any scientific data to show that it was necessary. Title V specifically states that the deep observation hole is not necessary for Title V inspection. The Board of Health never stated the local conditions or reason for enacting the regulation as is required by law. And despite the special town meeting called, which has never been done before for one article, called for one issue, despite that special town meeting being called and the overwhelming vote requesting the board to rescind the regulation, the Board of Health continues to thumb its nose at the voters. The Board of Health is an extremely powerful body, arguably the most powerful elected board in this town. I say this because, as we have experienced, the board can enact regulation that affects everyone all on a whim. And such decisions have been upheld by our Supreme Judicial Court. Does that mean they're always right? No. That means that two obstinate and arrogant people, two people, can affect your financial well-being with virtually no fear of consequences. This body, the town meeting, should be able to direct its elected representatives. And even if it can't, such as in this case, the elected representatives should respect the will of the voters. An example where the representatives have respected the will of the voters is on our ballot Monday. The select board did not have to pursue a 5-member board, yet they did, because that's what the voters asked them to do. That's the way things should work. Even though we can't force the Board of Health to rescind the regulations, what we can do as a body is twofold. Number one, know the person that you're voting for and make sure they understand that their primary role is to respect the will of the people. And two, vote yes on this article because it forces some accountability upon a rogue board. The requirements of this article are both reasonable, they're simple, they require the requisite hearing information to be disseminated, and they are obtainable. We know this because we experienced this when the Board of Health sent out information in our electric bills to all of us. It's already been done. Please join me in voting yes on Article 26. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have further discussion on this motion?
I'll be brief. Alan Hoffman, Board of Health. The regulations that were enacted are within Title V, and I'll just read briefly what they say. And this is State Sanitary Code. It's Section 15303, entitled Systems Failing to Protect the Public Health and Safety and the Environment. And then Section 1 says, right below it, if one or more of the following conditions exist as documented by inspection by an approved septic system inspector or determined by local approving authority or the department, the system is failing to protect the public health and public health and safety and the environment, and shall be upgraded in accordance with the timeframes of 310 CMR 153051 and the standards of 310 CMR 15404 and 15405. So I'm reading right from the code. So here, the appropriate specification under that section of the sanitary code is under number 7, a cesspool, privy, or any portion of a soil absorption system extends below the high groundwater elevation. So if the bottom of your septic system is below, I got one more sentence, ma'am. Is below the high groundwater mark, it is in violation of this section.
Yes, but point of order, the situation here is just to improve the communication, and you're saying that, and I'm confused as to what you're saying. I'm confused. So point of order, I'm confused. Because I need your comments on this motion.
I think it's up to the voters to decide. I want the voters to understand that this regulation is embodied in the state code.
Thank you.
Tim Hardy, Beaman Road. I've actually been very outspoken. I've already gone through over 310 pages of reading Title V, and a number of us have brought this to the Board of Health, especially to the chairman of the Board of Health, and there's nothing in Title V that states that we have to have a deep observation hole, for example, when there's a transfer of property, or if there is a septic failure.
We just need to keep the comments to this motion about the communication.
The bottom line is, we have gone to these meetings, we have asked the chair of the Board of Health, first of all, a special meeting was held, and a majority of the people in the town of Sterling, a majority voted to not have this extra amendment added. It passed. It went to the Board of Health, and they basically voted it down and said, no, we're not going to listen to the will of the voters. We as voters went to these meetings and we asked them specific questions. I myself, being a retired engineer, I asked for specific data and specific facts and specific studies. I never got an answer, never.
Okay.
This Board of Health needs to be held accountable. And so I would firmly ask that everybody here vote yes in this measure, because this Board of Health is really out of control and needs to be reined in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura Ritchie, 50 Bean Road. Ms. Moderator, what they said has nothing to do with this bylaw, okay? This bylaw actually will be helpful because people don't get newspapers anymore. They're required to put the notices for their hearings to adopt regulations and change things in the bylaws in town. So people don't get it, so they don't come to the hearings, okay? So this would make the board accountable to send you something in the mail outside of your light bill, okay? To make it so you know that maybe you want to show up when they're going to charge you $50,000 to have your septic system fixed.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? Great. So Article 26, to approve Articles 26, is voting starts now. Voting's closed. Simple majority. It passes. Article 27. Move that the town vote to amend the general bylaws, Chapter 70, Section 3, as presented in the warrant. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion? There being none, Article 27 up for vote. Voting starts now. Votes closed. Simple majority. Passes. Article 28, entertaining a motion that the town authorize the select board to petition the general court for enactment of special legislation as printed in the warrant. Do I have a motion? So moved. I heard. Second? Any discussion? There being none, Article 28, voting starts now. Voting is closed. Simple majority passes. Article 29, given the litany of the discussion on Article 2 and the school budget, I'll entertain a motion to pass over Article 29. Do I have a second? Do I have any discussion? With that being said, the motion to move over Article 29 starts. Oh, wait a second. Sorry. We need the clickers to update. The motion to pass over Article 29. The vote starts now. Voting's closed. Simple majority. Passes. And the last article is for our annual town election. Can I have a motion that we, in fact, have our annual town election on May 13th, as printed in the warrant? So moved. Do I hear a second? All in favor? Oh, sorry. Huh. Just kidding. Just waiting for the clickers. Although I guess I could have done it that way too, but it's okay. It's the last time you guys all have to deal with me. I'm not running for re-election. 30? Okay, Article 30. Now, the voting starts now. Okay, voting's closed. Can I do a voice for adjournment?
Yeah, you can just make, entertain a motion to dissolve.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to dissolve the, Article 30 passed. I'd like to entertain a motion to dissolve this meeting. Second. All in favor? All right, thank you so much. Have a great night.